I currently serve in the Texas House, and I try my best to get out as much as I can from the Capitol to spend time with Texas Democrats who are doing the work that is going to change this state for the better. And that's why I'm so proud to be here with all of you. There are two big things that Texans have been hearing about from the state capitol. The first is private school voucher scams. The second is Ken Paxton. And those two things are very much related. So in May of last year, a bipartisan coalition of Republicans and Democrats in the Texas House came together to impeach our corrupt Attorney General. But then a few months later, the Texas Senate acquitted Ken Paxton on all charges, restoring the most corrupt politician in Texas history to the office of top cop. Just weeks before that impeachment trial in the Senate, our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who was supposed to preside over that trial impartially, took $3 million from two of Ken Paxton's billionaire friends, Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes. These two billionaires are the exact same billionaires who are funding the effort to privatize and close our public schools. That's how these two things are related. Now, Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes are not just billionaire mega donors. They're not just fossil fuel executives. They also happen to be Christian nationalist pastors. Now, I know Christian nationalism is a phrase that we're hearing a lot. I want folks to know that there is nothing Christian about Christian nationalism. It is the worship of power, whether that's political power or social power or economic power. It is a betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. But these two guys are Christian nationalist pastors, and on Sundays, they are preaching at these far-right extremist churches. I know that billionaire pastor sounds like an oxymoron, but on Sunday mornings, that's exactly what these two guys are doing. And if you listen to their sermons, they don't preach a theology of universal love. They preach a theology of power and control and domination. They think climate change is God's will. They compare homosexuality to bestiality and pedophilia. They think that only Christians have a right to serve in public office. In fact, they told the former Republican Speaker of the Texas House, Joe Strauss, that he didn't have a right to be Speaker because he's Jewish. But the scariest part of all of this is that these two billionaires are spending their fortune to turn this toxic theology into law in the state of Texas. They are already pouring millions of dollars into our politics to buy politicians. So every Republican state senator has taken their money. Half of Republican House members have taken their money. And for some of these guys, more than half of their total campaign contributions come from these two billionaires. That's how pervasive their influence is in the Texas Capitol, in Texas government. But they don't just buy politicians, they're also funding this sprawling network of right-wing think tanks and advocacy organizations and media outlets. They are essentially trying to dismantle democracy in the second largest state in the country. They are building an authoritarian theocracy right here in the United States, right here in the great state of Texas. And that's why the last thing they want is an honest attorney general. The last thing they want are well-funded public schools that teach the next generation how to think for themselves. Those are obstacles in their path of creating an authoritarian state in Texas. Now, vouchers is probably new to some folks in here, but a lot of us have been around where we've heard about these voucher scams being proposed session after session. A voucher is any time that you take our hard-earned tax dollars out of our public schools and give them to unaccountable private schools. Now, I don't have a problem with private schools. There are a lot of great private school teachers. What I have a problem with is taking those tax dollars out of schools that are already underfunded and giving them away with those strings attached. There's nothing conservative about that. And that's why historically, Democrats and Republicans have come together to defeat these voucher scams. But just like Dan Patrick did the bidding of these two billionaires in the Ken Paxton impeachment trial, our governor, Greg Abbott, is now doing their bidding by calling special session after special session to try to pass this voucher scam for them. But I am happy to announce that on the Friday before Thanksgiving, that bipartisan majority for public education stood strong and defeated Greg Abbott's voucher scam. And that is a testament to a lot of the work that y'all have done, because our offices were flooded with calls and emails and folks showing up in person to advocate for public schools, to advocate for public school teachers and public school students. So I just want to thank you for the work that y'all did to make that possible. Texans have been defeating voucher scams since the first one was proposed in 1957. For the history buffs in the room, you know that was just 2 years after the Brown versus Board of Education decision came down from the Supreme Court. These vouchers have a dark history. And again, every decade they've been proposed, Texans have come together to defeat them. Because Texans love their public schools. Public education is enshrined in our state's constitution. And there's nothing more Texan than Friday Night Lights. Because schools are not just academic institutions. They are community hubs. They bring us together. And that's why they support democracy and why they are a threat to these billionaire megadonors. I want to say something real quick, because some of these voucher billionaires are pushing these slogans into our community to try to sell their scam. They say this is school choice. What this is school's choice, because the private schools get to deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. They can deny admission because of academics. They can deny admission because of behavior. They can deny admission because your parents don't make enough money, or because you're not the right cultural fit. So if anyone tries to tell you this is school choice, they're lying to you, because it's the private schools that get to choose, not you. The other thing is that a lot of these private schools don't have to provide transportation or special education services, and the price of the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost of tuition. So I used to be a teacher on the west side of San Antonio. I taught poor and working class kids. If you give them an $8,000 voucher, there's still no way that they can afford a $20,000 a year tuition bill. And so what ends up happening in these states that have tried these voucher scams is it doesn't improve student performance, it doesn't help poor and working class kids. All it does is give a discount to families who are already sending their kids to private school. So you're getting $8,000 off your tuition bill. If this passes in Texas, it'll be the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. It is welfare for the wealthy. It is welfare for the well-off. And that's why Democrats and Republicans and independents alike oppose these voucher efforts. But again, to sell them, they are trying to peddle a lie that our public schools are failing. There are more Texans graduating in this upcoming school year and going on to some kind of post-secondary education than ever before in our state's history. For the first time, we are educating poor kids, kids with disabilities, kids of color. The literacy rate in the United States is now 99%. That was unthinkable a decade ago. The high school dropout rate has declined consistently over the last 40 years. And last year alone, Texas teachers closed the COVID learning gap faster than anyone thought was possible, with limited resources and limited funding. I am not saying that our public schools are perfect. They're not. But they do transformative, life-changing work in our communities every single day. Public education, as a societal project, has been a tremendous success. We should double down on our public schools. We should bet on our public school teachers. And that's what this next session is going to be all about. So I told you I taught on the west side of San Antonio. The West Side is this beautiful, historic Mexican-American neighborhood. It's also one of the poorest zip codes in the state of Texas. So every day I watched as my students struggled heroically to overcome poverty, overcome racism, overcome systems that were designed to hold them and their families and their community back. My students are the reason I ran for office, because on the West Side, I taught one classroom that had 45 kids in it. There weren't enough desks for all of my students, so I had children sitting on the air conditioning unit in the wealthiest country in human history. In the 21st century, children sitting on the air conditioning unit. Texas is 43rd in the nation in per student education funding. Texas teachers are making less than they did 10 years ago when you adjust for inflation. And local property taxpayers are doing their best to stop the bleeding because the state government fails to do its fair share of education funding. We have a school funding emergency in this state, and it is the fault of our state government. So instead of siphoning off billions of dollars from our already underfunded schools, why don't we fully fund our neighborhood public schools? Why don't we give every Texas teacher a pay raise? Why don't we fund more programs for more kids to give actual choice to more families in our community? That's the kind of vision that most of us, whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican, support. And this next session is going to be a showdown about the future of public education in this state, and therefore the future of democracy. Because you don't have a democracy without public education and without public schools. And so I need your help. You helped us once, stop this voucher, but I need you to double down on those efforts. I need you to continue organizing here on the ground to get as many folks to support our public schools and to support this democracy. I don't care what your past party affiliations have been. I don't care if you put on a blue jersey or a red jersey. We can all agree that we need to fully fund public education and strengthen this democracy of ours. And that is what you are on the front lines doing every single day. I want, if we have time, to open this up to questions or comments or complaints, anything you want to bring up. It's a time that I can hear what you're thinking about and what we can do a better job of at the state capitol.
Foster care.
The question over here is about foster care. So, as you heard, as a former teacher, a lot of the work that I do at the state capitol is on children's issues, on family issues. And one of the most pressing is our foster care system. We are a wealthy state in a wealthy country, but because of our refusal to invest in our kids, particularly our most vulnerable kids in the system, has led to children sleeping in state office buildings, children dying on the state's watch. This is state-sponsored child abuse. And for all of these legislators who claim to be pro-life or pro-family values, for them not to spend a nickel of that historic $33 billion budget surplus on our kids, whether in the foster care system or in the public schools, is unconscionable. And it's hypocrisy of the highest order. We started the year with $33 billion in surplus. That's billion with a B. I proposed a bill that would have taken just half of that to invest in public education and invest in the foster care system and invest in the juvenile justice system. And we still would have had half left over to give property tax relief or fund infrastructure. And yet our governor refused to participate in this bipartisan effort to invest in kids in the state of Texas. He needs to be punished at the ballot box for that decision. And it's up to y'all to get the word out to folks in the community. I want to say real quick before we get to that about juvenile justice. I mentioned that I filed this bill to work on our juvenile justice system. Some of you may remember the headlines from 2 years ago where kids were being locked in windowless cells for 23 hours a day in our state's juvenile prisons. These are kids as young as 10 years old who, yes, have made big mistakes, but instead of rehabilitating these kids, we are re-traumatizing them. We're making them into expert criminals in these facilities, sometimes thousands of miles away from their families and their support systems. Again, this is state-sponsored child abuse. Not enough folks are talking about this. And our party needs to stand up and clearly articulate that we are the party of family values. We are the party that are going to protect the lives of children in this state, and not Texas Republicans. We had another question about water. So we've just barely talked about the environment. We here in the state of Texas are experiencing the effects of man-made climate change. Just in the last decade alone, Texans have faced historic droughts, devastating wildfires, which this community knows better than any, 500-year floods, record high temperatures, and the deadliest winter storm in our state's history that claimed the lives of 700 of our neighbors. Climate change is here. We are reeling from the effects of it every single day. Texas right now is the #1 emitter in greenhouse gases. So we're a big part of the problem, but that means that we could also be a big part of the solution if we get in the game. Texas is already the top producer in wind and solar energy. This is the future of our economy. We can lead the nation and the world to a greener, safer, more prosperous future. So whether it's on water infrastructure, whether it's on finally fixing the grid, we can take bold steps to marshal our state's resources to fight climate change and make life better for millions of Texans in the decades to come.